All right, so today we are going to be doing lesson 11 in our social studies activity book and our regular book. So, lesson 11 is about types of communities. In this lesson, we have 3 vocab words. We have rural, everybody say it, rural, suburb, and urban. All right, those are the 3 communities we are going to learn about today in our lesson. So, what are 2 types of communities so far? Just so what I've talked about. What are 2 types? Remember, it's our 3 vocab words. There's rural, suburb, or urban. So what are 2 types of communities? Rural, And Charlie, what's another one? Suburb, good job. All right, what kind of community is in a city? Urban community. Is that what you're going to say, Azella? Yep, an urban community is in a city. What is an urban community like? What's in a city? Zoe? Tall buildings and... Yeah, and roads and stores and trains and taxis and buses. All right, so how is a suburb different from a urban community? So a suburb is somewhere that's not in the city. So it's near the city, but it's not a busy part of town. You know what I'm talking about? So how is that different than a city? Charlie? It's a town, but it might have kind of the same thing as an urban part of the city, but it's not as busy. All right, so we are going to read about the types of communities. So everybody needs to follow along on page 26. Page 26. All right, so types of communities. People today live in many different kinds of communities. An urban community is in a city. In urban communities, people live close together. Taxis, buses, and trains roar. Subways whiz underground, and many people walk along the sidewalks. Many people often work in tall office buildings and stores. A suburb is a community near a city, but away from the busiest part. Suburbs are made mostly of houses, and families play and have cookouts in their yards. Many people in suburbs drive to work. So there on page 26, we see 2 different types of communities. So what is the first one, where the little boy is on the bike and the other boy is riding in his skates? What type of community is that? It looks like it's in a big city, so what type of community would that be? Zoe? No, it would be an urban community because it's in a big city. And then there's one right next to it where a girl is hula hooping in her yard. What would that be? You had it right. Zoe, what would that be? Suburb. Yes, it's a suburb because you can see her in her yard. All right. So what is a rural community like? What do you think a rural community is like? Yeah, like out in the country. That's how I live. I live in a rural community because I live out away from everybody else. All right. So, what kind of workers do you think would be in a rural community? Farmers and
teachers.
Yeah, I am a teacher. I do live in a rural community. But yeah, so what do you think can be grown in a rural community, Justin? What do you think can be grown there on their farms? Yeah, food. What kind of food? What kind of vegetables? Logan? Grapes and... Adrian? Corn. Yeah? Broccoli.
Apples.
Yeah, apples. You guys are making me hungry. Justin? Carrots, yeah. And some cows. Some cows too, right? And milk, yep. And milk. All right, look on page 27. So, A rural community is far from a city. We sometimes call a rural community the country. Houses are far apart, and many houses have large open areas of land or forest around them. Often people in rural communities are farmers and ranchers. They work on their own land. They grow foods like corn, wheat, beans, or they raise animals. Towns in rural areas are much smaller than cities. Many communities today are like Cain's community. People work together to do what God made people to do. But they do not want to serve God, they want to serve themselves. So, you see how the girls are hugging the goats in that picture? Do you think they probably raised the goats to sell them? Yeah. So, what are the 3 types of communities? Charlie, give me one.
Suburb.
Suburb, yep. Rural, yep. It's a tricky word to say, but what's the last one, Adrian, you know? A suburb. A suburb. Yep, that's the last one. A suburb. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at our worksheet together. Everybody get our worksheets out. You can go ahead and put up your books if you want to. All right. Let's look at our worksheets. So this worksheet on page 19 of your activity book says types of communities. Communities, an urban community is a city. A suburb community is near a city but far away from the busy part. And a rural community is far from a city. All right? Everybody got that? Yes, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So, mark all that apply to each kind of community. All right, so the first part says mark all that apply to each kind of community. It has descriptions, and then the next column says urban. The next column says suburb, and the next column says rural. So, people that live close together, what is that? What would those apply to? It would be suburb and urban. Yes, suburb and urban. So, we're going to mark those two with an X. So, put an X in those 2 boxes. All right, now this next question says houses are far apart. So what do you think that would be? Adrian? Rural, yes. So you can think people that live in the country are going to be rural. And they farm. Because their houses are far apart. All right, so the next one says made up of mostly houses. That would be the... Charlie? Suburb? Suburb, right. So we're going to put an X in that spot. All right, the next one says taxis and buses are used for transportation, and that would be Justin. Urban, yes. All right, the next one says grow food or raise animals. Oh. Yeah? Rural, yes, rural. So we're going to put an X in that one. All right, and what's referred to as the country? Yeah? No, it's the one where you're farming, yep. No, yeah. Rural, yes, rural again. So we're going to put an X in that one. What about the next one? Tall office buildings and stores, Logan. It sounds like urban. Urban, yes. So we're going to put an X by that. And then the last one says farms and ranches. Rural, yes. All right, so this question is pretty much, you don't have a wrong answer because it's whatever you live in. So circle the kind of community that you live in. I'm going to circle rural because I live out in the country. So I'm going to circle rural. Logan?
I live in an apartment.
Okay, so that would be suburbs.
I want suburbs and
I live in a house.
Mhm.
Me too.
You live in a house, so it would probably be suburbs.
I live in a house. I live in a neighborhood.
So that would be suburbs. The only way that you would be in an urban, the only way that your community would be urban is if you lived in downtown Jacksonville. Yeah.
I live in a house. A
My
pink
brother
house.
lives in No Road Street.
Okay. All right. So did everybody circle their community?
Yes.
All right. So what is your community like? I'm going to put my community is very kind and helpful.
How do you spell mine is very loud?
So you can put it like this. Yep, you can if you want. Well, if you don't know, then you can just put that your community is very kind and helpful. I'm sure they're nice. I put it right here.
But their dogs are very loud.
They're loud. Okay, well then you can put mine is very loud. Yes, Charlie?
I don't know spell annoying.
Just do your best. All right, so that was lesson 11. I hope this helped you guys.